Hello everyone, my name is Sarah Bibbins, and today for my Tech Talk, we are going to talk about extended reality and healthcare simulation. We are going to start with basic definitions of what is XR, then we're going to move on to XR in modeling and simulation theory. We're going to then talk about how it's used today with some evidence-based literature. Then we're going to move on to why it matters in military medicine and what the future of XR is in military healthcare simulation. Let's start at the very beginning. What exactly is XR? Well, in reality, it's an umbrella term for virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality, which we'll define further on the next slide. If you're anything like me, I've found these definitions very confusing over the last few years, so let's break them down. Virtual reality is any time you put on a headset and the real world disappears. So everything around you is a truly virtual environment. Think about it as somebody putting on a headset and going into a deployed T-C scenario in a desert. That would be a truly immersive virtual reality platform, and it is the furthest thing from the real world. Next, we talk about augmented reality. In this, you still see the real world around you, but you put a digital overlay on top. Think about Pokemon Go, the really popular app, or a surgeon in the OR with goggles on that is able to look up and see the CT scan of the patient on the operative field without having to go to a computer or have somebody read or project the imaging on a wall. And then mixed reality is the most complex, which is virtual objects are placed in the real room, but you can interact with them as if they're physically there. You can walk around barriers, you can have avatars sit on virtual couches. For me, how I like to think about this is if you have a virtual overlay on a task trainer that's showing a massive hemorrhage, you can then have students see that virtual overlay, pack the wound on the task trainer, or place a tourniquet, and it's going to increase the realism of that task trainer alone. So as we kind of alluded to earlier, real world is going to be obviously the most real, then augmented reality with an overlay in it, mixed reality with something you can interact with, and then virtual reality where the environment is totally immersive and virtual around you. Now let's connect XR to what we know about modeling and simulation, because this is what separates XR from just being an expensive toy. XR represents modern technological advancements in standardizing simulation-based training for healthcare professions education. It enables immersive, learner-centered training to improve motivation, knowledge retention, and skills acquisition. To date, there have been nearly 3,000 publications on the use of XR in HPE in low, middle, and high-income countries, including multiple disciplines, as well as interdisciplinary educational contexts. While research has progressed from pilot studies to competency-based educational models and large systematic reviews, the focus remains on isolated disciplines and short-term outcomes with limited longitudinal evidence on the long-term clinical competence or effect on patient care. Future research should prioritize theory-driven implementation, equitable and context-sensitive adoption, and longitudinal evaluation of educational outcomes across diverse professions and settings. XR has significant potential in HPE, with 43% of both VR and AR studies showing improved skill competency and knowledge acquisition in both medical student and nursing trainee studies. So far, it's been used for VR-based surgical training, AR-assisted diagnostic, teleconsultant, and treatment planning, immersive VR simulations for medical education, triage, and T-C training, VR-assisted analgesic reduction, and PTSD therapies. Some of its advantages are deliberate practice with unlimited repetitions and immediate feedback on some platforms, standardized training with pre-programmed objectives and physiologic responses. AI-based platforms allow large language module responses with reduced need for in-person moderation, and you have enhanced realism over traditional mannequin simulation. Now, it does have several disadvantages. There is a heavy reliance on tech, which may be prone to failure, and not all XR can run offline. The cartoonish avatars may limit realism or participant buy-in. Increased realism of XR may trigger a stress response and increase cognitive load in participants, and haptics remain limited across all VR technologies. Now, let's look at what the military is actively doing with XR right now. These are not just research projects, many are fielded operational systems. Now let's look at what the evidence shows. To date, there have been over 20 systematic reviews. This represents a mature evidence-based and not just a handful of pilot studies. In regards to surgical training, VR-trained surgeons had 79% fewer errors after a repeated VR practice for an anterior approach to total hip replacement. Additionally, they found that after the conclusion of the study, residents matched experts' performance after mastery of the VR curriculum. VR helps build confidence and speed in march pause training with TCCC VR training through SimX's Valor program, with every member reporting higher confidence after completing the algorithms. In terms of PTSD, VR therapy equals standard of care, with 77% of active duty personnel actually preferring the BraveMind VR exposure to standard PTSD therapy. In addition, VR was found to be more effective in patients with primary depression. Lastly, there was a 40% reduction in sensory pain with VR distraction in adolescents with severe burns undergoing wound care. Now let's talk about why XR is particularly well suited for military medicine specifically. A primary benefit of XR is there is no patient, therefore there is no risk of patient harm, and providers can use unlimited repetition for skills mastery. Military medicine demands high consequence, low frequency clinical decision making, and tactical skills rarely, if ever, are accounted in garrison. XR, however, allows for unlimited repetition of any time, in any place, in virtually any environment, helping to build the neural pathways that save lives. VR and XR are deployable. The MetaQuest 3 weighs about a pound and can run wirelessly for 2 to 3 hours. Currently, there is TC3 Sim, SimX Valor program, and Augmentor Medic, which are designed for untethered field deployable operation. Therefore, a BES commander can run T-Tri-C refreshers in a tent in Djibouti without requiring internet. It only requires a headset and a license to the program. Additionally, it solves access problems for military GME. Military surgical residents in particular face lower operative volumes and limited trauma exposure compared to the civilian counterparts. VR and preoperative rehearsal, validated now in multiple RCTs, can compensate for low OR exposure before deployment. This can also expand outside of surgical training, really across all military GME. Stress inoculation. This is one of the most underappreciated advantages. You can't replicate the stress of a dark village, an active shooter, a drone attack, or a mass casualty easily in a simulation center without multiple personnel, high-intensity moulage, and an extended simulation time. VR can get close, and research shows that training under stress improves real-world performance under stress that may translate to deployment care. XR is a treatment, not just a training, and has been shown to cause improvement in both PTSD and burn pain, defining injuries of soldiers in OIF and OEF. XR has evidence-based treatment protocols for each and is a fundamentally different value proposition than conventional simulation. Bottom line, nothing else checks all these boxes simultaneously at this current price point. Let's close by looking forward. Where is this technology heading, and what is the DoD betting on? For anyone advising on acquisition or curriculum investment, here is who's funding what. TATRIC is the Army's primary XR medical simulation research and development since 1999, with PC-based interactive multimedia, digital enhanced mannequins, virtual workbench, or park task simulators, and total immersive virtual reality. SimX Valor program has been used by the Air Force and the Army for T-Tri-C training that is now expanding into prolonged casualty care training, canine training, and even training for Space Force. They have received over $20 million in R&D and are now deployable in over 50 DoD units. T-Tri-C 3Sim is a multi-service, haptic-enabled T-Tri-C platform that is currently expanding into prolonged field care. Augmentor Medic has AR avatars on a live soldier patient for T-Tri-C refresh. It does not require mannequins or a facility, and currently they're evaluating integration with a live tissue curriculum. The Navy has built a $7.6 million renovation in San Diego with dedicated VR rooms and 50 shipboard and desert scenarios to focus on independent duty corpsman training. And lastly, the biggest funder right now is DARPA. They are currently working on VITAL, which is to make a cardiovascular digital twin for clinical decision support, but this is still several years out. They are looking at triage challenges using virtual MCI environments with digital avatars as well. Currently, we have already fielded operational systems with TC3Sim, SimX Valor, and Augment Medic. BraveMind PTSD training is currently available at over 170 sites. We have validated surgical VR systems, and the cost of a headset is as little as $500 for a portable, wireless, standalone system, in addition to cost of licensing. The AI wave is coming. GPT class language models integrated into VR mean that the patient will talk to you, respond to your clinical decisions, and deteriorate realistically if you make an error. AI is also beginning to score non-technical skills in addition to already assigned metrics for real-time feedback. Eye tracking will also allow for improved cognitive load assessments, and expert telepromptering with the AR overlay will allow remote providers to show images, surgical techniques, and provide advice to remote providers downrange. Haptics is the remaining major gap. However, realistic tissue resistance is possible with haptic gloves, and austere cloud VR libraries will improve the access to virtual environments. And patient-specific digital twins will allow you to rehearse an operation on a virtual replica built from the patient's own CT scans before you touch the patient. Lastly, generative AI will create any clinical scenario on demand. DARPA's VITAL program will build full cardiovascular digital physiologic twins, and the FDA is currently developing regulatory pathways for XR therapeutics. The pace of change is accelerating. What was experimental 5 years ago is operational today. What seems ambitious today will be routine by 2030. XR is a mature evidence-based simulation and treatment technology. It is no longer just experimental. Military medicine has unique structural needs: deployability, rare scale repetition, and stress inoculation that XR is uniquely positioned to solve. It has strong evidence with VR training showing similar to expert performance in routine surgical procedures. VR PTSD therapy is equivalent to gold standard, and VR distraction can reduce opioid use in burn pain victims undergoing wound care. AI and XR will transform the field over the next 5 years, and DoD investment is accelerating. Future initiatives are cost effectiveness, theory-driven implementation, operational transfer, and longitudinal evaluation of educational outcomes and retention. The question is no longer whether to use XR in military healthcare, it's how do we do it rigorously, equitably, and effectively. Thank you all for your time today. On this slide, I have key references for both clinical evidence as well as military and DoD programs. Thank you again for listening.